There's a certain kind of closeness that sneaks up on you, the kind that starts with a favor, then a phone call, then shared silences that feel safer than words. That's what I had with Emily. We met back in college. She was the firecracker in the back row, always challenging the professor, always laughing a little too loud. I was quieter, more observant. She said I balanced her chaos, and for some reason, that line stuck. From that first year on, we just clicked. But it was never romantic. Not officially. She always said, "You're like a brother to me." And I accepted that. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I did. Because sometimes being close to someone you care about, even if it's not the way you want, is better than not having them at all. Over the years, I was there for everything. The late-night breakups, the move across state lines, the job interviews she thought she bombed but crushed. I held her hand when her mom passed. I helped her carry boxes when her ex-husband moved out. And when she called me crying 6 months ago, telling me she was pregnant from a relationship that wasn't supposed to be serious, I didn't hesitate. I showed up with soup, prenatal vitamins, and that same quiet support I'd always offered. I was all in. Not because I had to be. Because I wanted to be. I painted the nursery, installed the car seat, held her hair back when the morning sickness hit like a freight train. She said, "You're going to be Uncle David," and laughed like that word was enough to hold the space I lived in. But then, 2 weeks ago, I dropped by unannounced to bring her a care package. She was out. I let myself in with the key she'd given me months ago, the one she called, just in case. I wasn't snooping. I was just setting the groceries on the counter when I saw it. An envelope, cream-colored. Elegant script, a baby shower invitation. I smiled at first. I didn't know she'd sent them already. Then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The envelope wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't mine at all. It had been left out, half open. Curious, I peeked inside. And there it was. "Join us for a celebration of Emily and Michael as they welcome their baby girl." Michael. Not me. Michael. The guy she swore wasn't in the picture. The guy she said bailed the minute he found out. The guy she cried over for nights in my arms. He wasn't just back. He was being celebrated. And I wasn't even invited. I stood there staring at that piece of cardstock like it was written in fire. And that's when it hit me. I was never family. I was just filler. I stood in that kitchen longer than I should have, still holding the envelope like it might rewrite itself if I stared hard enough. Emily and Michael. Elegant, clean, celebratory. No trace of the months she'd spent breaking down on my couch, swearing she was alone in this, that she didn't want anything to do with the man who gave her this child and then disappeared. So what changed? When did he go from ghost to guest of honor? I set the envelope down carefully, like it might shatter. I should have walked out right then, should have left the groceries, turned the key, and locked the door on whatever this was. But something kept me rooted there, something between heartbreak and rage. And yeah, maybe a little shame, because a part of me always suspected this might happen. I just didn't think she'd hide it from me. The fridge kicked on behind me, the only sound in the apartment. Her space smelled like lavender and baby lotion. Her shoes sat by the door exactly where I used to trip over them. Her favorite blanket, the one I bought her last winter, was folded neatly on the couch we once fell asleep on watching reruns. I wandered toward the nursery, painted soft sage green. I'd picked the color. She called it peaceful. We hung cloud decals together, her belly just starting to show. She asked me if I thought she'd be a good mom, and I told her she'd be incredible. I meant every word. There was a new stuffed animal on the shelf now. One I didn't recognize. A little white elephant with a tag that read, "From Daddy." It hit me in the chest like a sucker punch. So he was back. Not just in name, not just in that card, but here. Present. Giving gifts. Earning titles I'd spent months filling the silence for. And I was out. Not with a goodbye. Not with a talk. Just a quiet, clean cut she hadn't even bothered to tell me she made. I walked back to the living room. Picked up the invitation again. No, David. No, Uncle. No mention. Just a name left off the list like I'd never existed. She hadn't even texted me about it. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over her name. Do I text? Do I ask? Do I confront? I didn't know what would be worse, getting some half-baked explanation, or hearing her admit what the invitation already told me, that I was never supposed to be part of the future. In the end, I didn't call. Didn't write. I put the groceries away. Every last one. Lined up the prenatal vitamins like I always did. Put the soup in the cabinet next to the others. Folded the receipt and stuck it under the magnet on her fridge. Then I left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't break anything. just locked it behind me and dropped her key into the mailbox on my way out. It landed with a small, metallic clink. Final. Back in my truck, I sat behind the wheel and stared at the dashboard. The silence felt heavy, not because I'd lost her, but because I realized I'd never had her, not in the way I thought. I had her sadness, her loneliness, her temporary moments of need, but I didn't have her. And I was done being someone's emotional pit stop while they waited for the person they really wanted to come around. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying conversations in my head, little moments where maybe she tried to tell me, or maybe I just wasn't ready to listen. I pulled out my old notebook, the one I hadn't touched since the day we painted the nursery. And I wrote, "You called me your constant, your brother, your anchor, but the truth is, I was the placeholder, the quiet support, for the man you were hoping would change his mind. And when he did, you didn't need me anymore." I closed the notebook, and for the first time in months, I felt something unfamiliar. Not heartbreak, clarity. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Emily. It was casual, light, like nothing had shifted between us. "Emily, hey you red heart, thanks for dropping off the groceries. Sorry I missed you. Baby brain lately face with tears of joy, let's catch up soon." I stared at it for a long time. How do you respond to something like that? How do you pretend that a baby shower invitation with another man's name on it didn't tear a hole straight through you? I set the phone down without answering, let her sit in the silence she deserved. I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself, cleaned out my garage, sorted through junk I should have thrown away years ago. It felt good to toss things in the trash, old receipts, broken tools, memories that didn't serve a purpose anymore. Funny how easy it is to get rid of clutter when you finally admit it's just taking up space. By late afternoon, I still hadn't replied to her. She sent another message. "Emily, everything okay? You've been quiet." "Yeah, quiet." That's what happens when someone you thought you could trust turns you into a footnote. I didn't answer. Instead, I got in the truck and drove. No destination. Just roads and the steady hum of tires on pavement. I ended up at the lake where we used to go during college. The one with the rickety old dock and the water that always smelled a little too much like algae in the summer. It was deserted now, wind cutting across the surface, the old boards creaking under my boots as I walked to the end. I sat there for a while, jacket zipped up, hands in my pockets, just breathing. And thinking about all the ways I let myself be small for her. Thinking about all the times I told myself that being family was enough, even when my heart begged for something more. Thinking about how I always let her needs come first because I thought loyalty meant sacrifice. But loyalty isn't blind. And sacrifice without respect isn't noble. It's self-destruction. The sun dipped lower, setting the water on fire with that deep, burnt orange glow. I pulled out my notebook and wrote, "Family doesn't leave you off the invitation. Family doesn't hide their joy. Family doesn't celebrate the ones who walked away, while erasing the ones who stayed." I snapped the notebook shut and leaned back on my elbows, staring up at the sky. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not some grand speech or confrontation. Just sitting quietly in the wreckage, realizing you survived it. My phone buzzed again. I let it go. I didn't need to hear her excuses. Didn't need to hear about how things got complicated or how she never meant to hurt me. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't about what she meant. It was about what she chose. And she chose him. Without hesitation. Without explanation. Without the courtesy of honesty. I drove back home with the windows down, letting the cold air scrape the numbness off my skin. Letting it wake me up. At home, I packed a box. Not for her. For me. A box of things that no longer served a place in my life. The old hoodie she used to steal, the Polaroids from beach trips where we smiled too wide for the camera, the little ceramic owl she bought me as a joke. I sealed the box and wrote one word on it. Done. Because I was. Not bitter. Not broken. Just done. I left the box by the door. Tomorrow, I'd drop it off at Goodwill. Tonight, I'd sleep in a house that didn't feel like hers anymore. And maybe, just maybe, I'd wake up in a life that finally belonged to me. I didn't drop the box off at Goodwill the next morning. I burned it. There was something ceremonial about it, watching those memories curl and blacken under open flame, the smoke rising like it carried the weight I no longer wanted to hold. I built a fire pit behind my garage years ago, back when everything felt simpler. It had mostly been for late summer nights, cheap beer, and worse guitar playing. But today, it had a new purpose. One by one, I fed the past to the fire. The hoodie, the Polaroids, the ceramic owl with one chipped wing, gone. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, the cold biting through my jacket, but I didn't move. I watched until the last ember dimmed, and then I turned around and walked back inside. There were no tears. No rage. Just a calm, tired sense of completion. Later that afternoon, Claire called. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, not since she moved across town to open her second bookstore. She was always busy, always in motion, but somehow always knew when to check in. Felt like today was one of those days, she said, voice light but familiar. Yeah, I replied. It was. We ended up meeting for coffee at that little spot on Main, the one with mismatched chairs and windows that fogged from the inside. She was already at a corner table when I arrived, a half-empty cup in front of her and a dog-eared paperback resting on her knee. Rough morning? She asked, even before I sat down. I nodded. Burned the box. She smiled, not unkindly. That's one way to let go. It helped, I said, and I meant it. Claire had always had a quiet way of listening, not with the kind of performative sympathy most people throw at you, but with real presence. The kind that makes you feel like your words actually land somewhere. I told her everything. About the invitation, the name, the white elephant with the "From Daddy" tag, the texts I never answered, and how I realized, finally, that I was never the person she built a future with, just the person who filled in the gaps while she waited for someone else to come around. Claire stirred her coffee slowly. She used your heart like a waiting room. That line landed hard. You deserved a seat at the table, she added, not just the hallway outside. I didn't speak, because for the first time in weeks, I didn't have to. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. I was going to wait till your birthday, she said, sliding it across the table. But I think today's more appropriate. I opened it. Inside was a new journal, black leather, heavy, thick pages. No title, just space. I think you've got more to write, she said. I flipped to the first page, blank and clean, and stared at it like a doorway I wasn't quite ready to walk through. But I would be, soon. I looked up at her. You ever just wish you could unknow someone? She shook her head. No, I think the knowing is the gift, even when it hurts. That night, I went home and opened the new journal. I didn't write a lot, just this. You can give someone everything, your time, your heart, your loyalty, and they'll still choose the person who gave them the least. But that's not your flaw. It's theirs. And the one thing they'll never deserve is your regret. I closed the book, sat in the stillness of the room I no longer imagined her in, and for the first time, the silence didn't echo with what ifs. It felt like the start of something better, and this time, I wouldn't have to beg for a seat at the table, because I was building my own. The baby shower came and went without a word from her. No text, no call, no, sorry you couldn't make it, nothing. I didn't expect an invitation, not anymore, but some part of me, I'll admit it, hoped she'd acknowledge the absence. Say something to mark the space where I used to be. Even a lie would have been easier than the silence she left in its place. But she didn't. She moved on, and I was erased with the kind of precision only someone who's done it before could manage. And I'm not saying that to be cruel, just honest. Because people like Emily, they don't mean to be careless. They just don't think anyone bleeds when they step away. That Sunday, I walked past her street on the way to the hardware store. Could have gone a different way, but I didn't. The balloon arch was still up, soft pink and white against the pale gray sky. A little sign in the yard read, "It's a girl," in glittering cursive. I didn't slow down. Didn't glance at the cars in the driveway or the faces through the front window. I just kept walking. Because closure doesn't come from confronting someone who never owned their part in your pain. It comes from refusing to stand in the doorway waiting for them to. Back home, I finally tackled the shelf I'd been avoiding, the one in the hallway closet packed with old photo albums, gifts, little things I used to associate with us. A ticket stub from a concert we never made it to. A note she left on my fridge last Thanksgiving, "You're my favorite person to come home to." I read it once. Just once. Then tore it down the middle and tossed it in the trash. The past doesn't get to live rent-free in my home anymore. I spent the rest of the evening organizing, rearranging, reclaiming space. And when it was done, I sat on the floor in the quiet and opened the journal Claire gave me. That blank first page had been haunting me since the night she handed it over. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I was finally ready to say something different. I wrote. She didn't invite me, not because she forgot, but because I was never meant to be part of the story she wanted to tell. She needed me to hold her together, but not enough to hold a place for me. When she got what she wanted, I stared at those words for a long time. Not out of anger. Out of acceptance. I'd spent too long trying to be everything for someone who only needed me to be something for a while. Later that week, I ran into her sister, Rachel, at the grocery store. I tried to dodge the aisle, but she saw me first. "David," she said, surprised, but not unpleasant. "Hey." I nodded. "Hey, Rachel." She glanced down at the cart, then back at me. "Haven't seen you around. You doing okay?" "I'm alright," I said, and for once, I wasn't lying. She hesitated. "Then, I just wanted you to know," she asked, "about you. At the shower." That stopped me cold. "She did?" Rachel nodded. Not out loud, but she looked for you. I could tell. I didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know what it meant, or if it meant anything at all. "She made a choice," I said quietly. "I know," Rachel replied, "but that doesn't mean it didn't cost her something." We stood there in silence, caught between two shelves of cereal and 1,000 things we weren't saying. "Take care, David," she said, gently. "You too." She walked away, and I stood there, staring down an aisle full of decisions. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe it did cost Emily something, but she never paid it in my direction. So I turned back to my cart, finished shopping, and when I got home, I wrote again. She missed me at the shower, but she didn't miss me enough to change the guest list. And that's the thing about people who ask about you from a distance. They don't want you back. They just want to believe they didn't really lose you. And that belief wasn't mine to carry anymore. A week after the baby shower, I got the voicemail. It came in just after 10 p.m. I saw her name flash across my screen while brushing my teeth, and for a second, I froze. I didn't answer, just watched it ring until it stopped. The second it did, the notification popped up. One new voicemail from Emily. I stared at it for a while. I'd done so well keeping my distance, letting the silence speak for me, but curiosity has a way of creeping back in through locked doors. So I listened. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Strained. "Hey, I wasn't sure if I should call. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wanted to say thank you. For everything. For being there when I didn't know how to be there for myself. I know I've been distant. I know I hurt you. I just didn't know how to explain what I was feeling. Or what I needed. I hope you're okay. I really do." That was it. No apology. No accountability. Just a vague, tear-softened thank you sent into the dark like it might fix everything. I deleted the voicemail. Not out of spite. Out of mercy. Because holding on to it would only be me keeping her voice in places I'd already cleaned out. She made her choice. She got what she wanted. And now she wanted forgiveness without the discomfort of asking for it. I wasn't going to give her that. Not because I hated her, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop handing out grace to people who never earned it. The next day, I drove to the coast. No plans. Just a day trip to watch the waves crash into something other than me for once. I stood on the edge of a pier with a hot coffee and the wind pressing against my jacket like an old friend checking in. I watched the horizon for an hour without thinking about her. Not once. And that meant something. When I got back home, there was a package on my doorstep. No return label. Just my name, scrawled in handwriting I knew instantly. Inside was a small envelope. A photo. Her. Michael. And the baby, wrapped in a pink blanket, sleeping between them. On the back, scribbled in blue pen, "She's beautiful. I hope one day you'll meet her." No signature. No context. Just that. I placed the photo on the counter and stared at it. And I waited. For anger. For grief. For some aching urge to pick up the phone and say, "Why now? Why this?" But none of it came. Because that chapter was closed. No photo, no voicemail, no soft-spoken regret would reopen it. I didn't need to meet the baby. She wasn't mine to meet. And Emily wasn't mine to forgive. That night, I pulled out Claire's journal and opened to a fresh page. The pen felt heavier than usual, like it was carrying all the weight I refused to anymore. I wrote, "There's a kind of goodbye that doesn't need a door to close. It's in the silence between messages. In the space after the ring stops. It's when their version of closure is a picture you never asked for. And yours is simply not needing it anymore." I left the photo where it was. Not framed. Not kept. Just one more thing I'd eventually toss out with the rest. Because this life I was building, it didn't have a crib in the corner. It didn't have names I didn't know how to say anymore. It had me. And I was done being everyone else's almost. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't make noise. There's no soundtrack when you start feeling like yourself again. No celebratory banner when your mind stops circling the same questions. You just wake up one day, step into the morning light, and realize you didn't think of them first thing. That's how I knew I was making it through. It had been weeks since Emily's voicemail. The photo was gone, tossed in the trash with the rest of the junk mail, no dramatics. I hadn't responded. I hadn't needed to. Instead, I'd been pouring my time into work, picking up a few side jobs, and spending more afternoons at Claire's bookstore. She always had a fresh pot of coffee going and an extra chair waiting. Some days we talked. Other days we just shared space. Her organizing new shipments, me scribbling in that black leather journal like I was trying to put my soul back together word by word. One Tuesday afternoon, she sat across from me and asked, "You still writing about her?" I paused. "No, not really." She nodded, sipped her coffee. "That's how you know you're starting to heal. When your story stops ending with their name." I looked down at the page in front of me. I'd been working on something new, messy, honest, unfinished. Not about heartbreak. About starting over. "Do you ever think people come into your life just to teach you how to leave them?" I asked. Claire leaned back. "Maybe. Or maybe they come to show you how much you were settling." That sat with me. Because yeah, maybe I had been settling. Not for less affection, but for less honesty. Less presence. Less of everything I deserved but didn't know how to ask for. Later that evening, as we closed the shop together, Claire lingered near the door. "Want to grab dinner?" she asked, casually. I looked at her, really looked at her, no longer through the haze of heartbreak, but with eyes that finally saw her for who she was. Grounded, kind, present, and not once had she ever tried to be anything but there. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." We ended up at a quiet diner off 7th Street. Booth by the window. Old school jukebox playing soft Motown. She ordered a grilled cheese and tomato soup. I got the burger. It felt simple in the best possible way. No performances. No waiting for a text that would never come. Just two people, sharing warmth in a world that so often forgets how to be soft. At one point, she looked at me with a tilt of her head and asked, "What are you most proud of?" It caught me off guard. I thought about it, then said, "Not going back. Not letting her story be the only one that mattered." Claire smiled. "That's a good one." "You?" I asked. She tapped her spoon against the bowl. "Probably still showing up for people. Even when I've got every reason not to." And there it was again, that quiet strength I'd started to lean into. The kind that doesn't demand a spotlight. The kind that stays, even when no one's looking. After dinner, she walked me back to my truck. The night was cold but not cruel. Streetlights painted the pavement gold. We stood there for a second, keys in hand. "You doing okay?" she asked. "Better than I was." "Good," she said, then smiled. "I was starting to get tired of watching you carry that ghost around." I laughed. "You and me both." She reached out and touched my wrist lightly. "Just a second. Just enough to say I'm here, without needing more." I got in the truck, watched her walk away, and didn't feel that familiar ache I used to carry every time someone left. Because she wasn't leaving. Not really. Back home, I opened the journal again. This time, the words came without hesitation. "Healing isn't loud. It doesn't slam doors or scream closure. It's slow. It's subtle. It's finally ordering a second plate of fries. Because you're not saving room for someone who never showed up." And that night, I slept without dreaming of her. Without needing to. Because I was finally writing a story where I wasn't the placeholder. I was the beginning. The first time I saw Emily in person after everything, it was by accident. Grocery store, frozen foods aisle. I was reaching for a bag of peas. She was coming from the opposite direction, pushing a cart with one hand and cradling a bundled-up baby in the other. Our eyes met before either of us could look away. She stopped short, her face drained of color. Then she smiled, a nervous twitch more than anything sincere. "David," she said, almost breathless. "Hi." I gave a polite nod. "Hey." The baby, hers now, fully and truly, let out a tiny whimper. She bounced her gently, whispering something I couldn't hear. "She's beautiful," I said, surprising even myself. Emily softened. "Thank you. Her name's Lila." I nodded again. Didn't say it out loud, but Lila wasn't the name we once joked about. Back when she used to say, "If I ever have a daughter, I want you to help me name her." Apparently, I missed that vote too. "She looks like you," I added, mostly to fill the space between us. "I wasn't sure you'd speak to me," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Well, you did send me a photo of the baby I wasn't allowed to meet." She flinched. "I didn't mean it like that. I thought maybe you'd want to see her. From a distance." "That's the thing," I said, eyes locking onto hers. Everything with you started to feel like distance. I just didn't realize I was being pushed out until the door had already closed. Emily looked down, fingers tightening around the handle of the cart. I never meant to hurt you. You did anyway, I said flatly. And I'm not here to rehash it all. You made your choices. I've made mine. She looked up then, a kind of sadness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Do you hate me? I shook my head. No, I just don't miss you anymore. That seemed to hit her harder than any anger would have. We stood in silence, surrounded by shelves of frozen dinners and neatly stacked produce. A ridiculous place for a reckoning, but fitting, in a way. Life doesn't wait for perfect backdrops. She took a breath. He's not around anymore. Michael, he didn't last. Said he wasn't ready for the responsibility. I felt nothing. No vindication. No joy. No, I told you so. Just a strange, detached ache. Not for her, but for the version of me that would have rushed to the rescue before. The man who would have forgiven, fixed, and folded back into her life without hesitation. But that version, he was gone. I hope you're okay, I said genuinely. And I hope she never knows what it feels like to be treated like a placeholder. Emily's lip trembled, but she nodded. You deserved more. I know, I said. And now, I have it. With that, I stepped past her. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Later that night, I sat at my desk, the journal open, heart calm. No anger in my chest. Just truth. And I wrote, some people come back, not because they miss you, but because they thought you'd still be standing in the same spot. But healing doesn't wait for someone else's regret. It moves forward. And so did I. I closed the book, turned off the light, and for the first time since she left me out of her future, I stopped looking for a way back into her past. 2 weeks after I saw her in the store, Claire invited me to a small open mic night at the bookstore. She was calling it Second Chapters. People reading stories, not about heartbreak or endings, but about the middle. About what happens after the storm passes, when you're still standing but unsure what to do next. She said I didn't have to speak. Just come, she said. Be there. I showed up early, helped move some chairs, adjusted the string lights overhead. The place looked different under warm bulbs, less like a shop, more like a space where something good could happen. As the room filled, Claire passed me a folded sheet of paper. You wrote something, she said, not asked. I smirked. Always. Read it. I stared at her. I didn't plan on. She touched my arm. You didn't plan on a lot of things. Doesn't mean they weren't supposed to happen. She walked off before I could answer. I sat there for the first few readers. Young voices, older souls, a woman who'd just come through divorce, a guy who read about losing his dad. And then Claire stepped up to the mic, her voice soft but confident. Our next reader is someone who's lived a few quiet chapters. But I think tonight, he's finally ready to write out loud. David? The room turned to look at me. I hadn't been nervous in a while, but my palms suddenly remembered how. Still, I stood up, walked to the front, held the paper with both hands. Then read. This isn't a story about loss. It's a story about what stays. When the wrong things finally leave. It's about the silence that follows. And how it doesn't echo regret. It rings with clarity. Because I used to believe, being there for someone, meant waiting for them to see you. But now I know, being seen, starts with seeing yourself, and choosing to stay, even when no one's looking. I paused, looked up. The room didn't clap right away. It just breathed with me. That kind of sacred quiet where people don't just hear you, they feel you. And then the applause came. Not loud, but honest. Afterward, Claire found me in the corner, a soft smile on her face. You're better than you know, she said. I laughed. That's a low bar. No, she said. That's a start. We locked eyes for a second longer than usual. Something shifting, finally, without the weight of comparison or ghosts. I'm proud of you, she added. I'm proud of me too, I admitted. We didn't make plans after that. Didn't need to. She walked out the door first. I followed a few minutes later, the cold night air rushing over me like a second wind. Back home, I placed the folded page inside my journal and wrote underneath it. I used to write about her. Like she was the ending, but she was only the turning point. The pause. Before the pen found a better direction, I closed the journal, set it on the nightstand, and turned off the light. That night, I dreamed, not of Emily, not of the life I thought I lost, but of blank pages. And for the first time, I couldn't wait to fill them. Spring came quietly. No big shift, no dramatic thaw, just a slow melt of everything that once froze me in place. The mornings were warmer. The light stretched longer into the evenings. And I started waking up without that knot in my chest. I hadn't heard from Emily since the grocery store. She hadn't called. No texts. No more surprise mail. I guess whatever moment of hesitation she'd had passed. And that was fine. That was right. Because I'd said what I needed to. Not to hurt her, but to set myself free. Sometimes people don't deserve your anger. They deserve your absence. And I had finally given her mine. Claire and I had settled into something, unspoken. We weren't rushing. We weren't labeling. But we kept showing up. Coffee after she closed the shop. Late night walks through the park. Long conversations about things that didn't require pain to have depth. One night, we sat on her rooftop. 2 chairs. 1 blanket. City lights blinking around us like stars had fallen into traffic patterns. I never asked, she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, do you regret any of it? She didn't have to say her name. I knew what she meant. I thought about it. Regret? I echoed. No. I gave what I had. I showed up. I stayed longer than I should have, but only because I believed in something. Claire looked over. And now? I smiled. Now I believe in someone else. She tilted her head. Who's that? Me. She laughed softly, and that laugh, gentle, real, earned, was better than any closure Emily could have ever tried to hand me. That night, I went home and reopened the journal one last time. There were only a few pages left. The weight of every word that came before it pressed up through the spine. I flipped to the final sheet, took a breath, and wrote. She told me I was like a brother. But brothers don't paint nurseries. For children that aren't theirs. Brothers don't get left off the invitation. Brothers don't spend nights holding someone together, only to be erased from the family photo. I wasn't her brother. I wasn't her future. I was just the safe space between her mistakes and her next try. And now, I'm no longer the in-between. I'm the after, the healed, the man who stopped asking to be chosen, and started choosing himself. I set the pen down, closed the journal, and felt, truly, finally, done. A week later, Claire and I sat on a bench at the Sunday market, sharing a bag of kettle corn and trading stories about the worst dates we'd ever been on. Her list was longer, way longer. You know, she said, I think the hardest part isn't the heartbreak. It's that moment when you realize you were never really seen. I nodded slowly. That's why it feels so good when someone finally does. She looked up at me, eyes clear, calm. I see you, she said. And it didn't feel like a line. It felt like a promise. Not the kind that comes with rings and flowers and a dramatic sunset behind it, but the kind that shows up every day, quiet, steady, real. And for once, I didn't second guess it. I just let it happen.